Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Worthington. I am a executive cyber strategist and advisor for CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike is extremely happy to sponsor today's panel, and we want to extend our thanks to the Navy League for putting this on. Cyber is incredibly important and more critical today probably than ever. They told me I have 2 minutes to give a talk on CrowdStrike, and using NFL Super Bowl terms, that's probably about a $35 million spot that I have here. So I will not take up the $35 million, but yeah, as a retired Army officer, I do want to elicit feedback and comments on a VR app that I can use as I walk around the Navy League, so I can translate what the ranks are, because I am having some difficulty translating all the ranks. So if anyone wants to develop that for me, I would certainly love that. But no, the CrowdStrike, and we have one mission here at CrowdStrike, and it's to stop breaches. Much like the Navy's mission is to secure the seas for U.S. interests and our partners. And we certainly can't do that today unless we are looking into the domain of cyber. And the panel today will talk about the maritime integration of cyber, because we understand and recognize that it's not only how we do cyber or how our allies do cyber or how NGOs do cyber, but it's how we all do cyber in an integrated manner, so that it is complementary and ensures the defenses of our networks, and so that we can secure the high seas. So I would like to introduce the moderator today for today's panel, Josh Cryer, if you would come out and introduce the panelists, and then we can get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hanging tough to the end of the day. I'd like to introduce our cybersecurity panel for this afternoon. First up, Lieutenant General Matthew Glavey, Deputy Commandant for Information, United States Marine Corps. Second is Rear Admiral Mike Ryan, Commander, U.S. Coast Guard Cyber. Mr. Charles Henderson, Global Managing Partner and Head of X-Force of IBM. And last but not least, Rear Admiral John Ocon, Director of Warfighting Integration, N2N6I, Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, U.S. Navy. And I am Josh Ryder. I am not Chris Cleary, as you may have seen in your program. Gentlemen, please sit down. I am, in fact, the Deputy Principal Cyber Advisor for the Secretary of the Navy. Mr. Cleary, my boss, could not be here today. He got called up to Capitol Hill on short notice. For those of you that are wondering what the PCA is, I'm sure my boss would love to tell you all about it. My description will be much shorter. The PCA was a position created by Congress in the FY20 NDAA. In short, where the CIO leaves off, for those of you that have heard Aaron Weiss's information superiority vision, where you have modernize, innovate, and defend, and the PCA picks up, we have secure, survive, and strike, where secure and defend overlap in that nexus of cybersecurity. And that's what we're going to talk about today in cybersecurity, going both to the left in modernize, innovate, and defend, and to the right, secure, survive, strike. When we talk about cyber using more legacy terminology from more kinetic warfare, the adversary's weapon engagement zone is no longer bound by geography or distance. They don't have to wait for weather, high or low tide, or cover of darkness. That said, the cyber environment, ironically, is an attack surface that we, as a partnership between the public and private sector, architect and control. We literally build the attack surface that the enemy uses against us. But in the building of our system, security of that environment has often been a performance trade-off with cost and schedule. And unfortunately, our adversary now gets a vote on when that bill comes due. So, ladies and gentlemen, your esteemed panel for this afternoon of cybersecurity, and we will jump right into questions. We will leave 20 minutes at the end for audience questions, but we'll start with you, General Glavey. Our joint doctrine states that cyber operations are generally most effective when integrated with other fires. How is the Marine Corps integrating cyber capabilities with other non-kinetic effects like EW and information, along with traditional kinetic fires?
So did you want a 3-minute opening comment?
I am so sorry. I blew that right out of the gate. Sorry, 3-minute opening.
So first of all, I want to thank the Navy League for putting this incredible event on. It's great for everybody to be back in person, doing the do, and appreciate everybody being here. Truly great Americans. Also, Julia, who put the team together. We want to thank Julia for all her work in getting us here on time in uniform, and it's great to be here. I'd like to just kind of start my comments out by framing, as the Marine Corps looks at this environment, it really looks at it holistically. So playing out before our very eyes, on TV, on the internet, wherever you turn, is this incredible information war that's going on in the UCOM AOR. It's hard not to see it, feel it, and begin to understand it. It is prevalent that the side that is able to gain and maintain the information advantage has an edge. We'll see how time plays out here, but momentum does matter. And what kind of edge in the information environment am I talking about? Starting with the bare fundamentals of systems overmatch. That a 1970s T-80 tank would be no match for an information age smart weapon probably is rather eye-opening, and to see the asymmetric advantage that the information age has provided. Same with a good prevailing narrative. The side that has a good message, trusted, confident, delivered with tradecraft, has an edge, and we're seeing that play out before our very eyes. The third aspect from an information advantage is resiliency. As you all know, you got to be able to take a punch in this environment. You have to be resilient. And that side that can take that punch and either counterpunch or begin anew, again, creates an edge. And something we look at very closely from a Marine Corps aspect. So the Marine Corps has been focused here. The information environment started with our 37th Commandant into our 38th Commandant, and very clearly driving to greater outcomes. We stood up the Deputy Commandant for Information to bring all these capabilities together under a single advocate, to provide the Commandant what he need from a policy, training, and other very important qualities in order to build it. We did the same thing in the fleet. We took our Marine Expeditionary Forces and we created the MEF Information Group. So again, converging all these critical capabilities that really enable each other and providing a unity of command and a unity of effort construct. Additionally, we started professionalizing it. All the organization in the world means nothing if you don't have the right people. So we stood up our information maneuver occupational specialties. And here we bring our cyberspace Marines together now with our space officers and space Marines, together with our influence Marines, to create a more holistic, predictable, repeatable tradecraft that our MEF commanders desperately need. This goes along with all the intel functions and everything else that really rely on the information environment to be successful. We're in the final stages of crafting, like everything else we do, a doctrinal publication that kind of sets this starting point for the Marine Corps. And of course, it's MCDP 8, information, as you would expect, and all founded on our warfighting construct of maneuver warfare that General Gray articulated and the 31st Commandant, General Krulak, galvanized. And so the Marine Corps is eyes wide open as we enter into this age, probably like none other. And old thought, status quo, not going to work. And again, we're seeing that play out. Mike, over to you.
Great, sir. Thanks so much. And hey, it's a great privilege to be here. It's, I think, fortuitous that I'm sitting in between a trusted cyber warrior, somebody that has proven themselves in this emerging battle space with General Glavy, and had the distinct privilege to be able to work with him for a couple years in this capacity, but then straddled on the left by the rest of the tri-service maritime environment and also industry. And if we think about, that's natural trade space for the Coast Guard. We sit in that environment day in and day out, and then we look and try to envelop all the other stakeholders that we can find. And when I look out in the audience, I have no doubt that there's trusted professionals that are as committed to the mission outcomes as what my forces are. And so by connecting within the broader joint force, being tightly coupled with General Nakasoni's tentacles and really under his mission mandates, but then also being closely tied and coupled to the Department of Homeland Security and thinking about, how do we protect our great nation? Everything from national security to economic security. That is prime real estate for the Coast Guard. And so today, I'll have a chance to talk about the framework that we're operating within that environment. And I noticed they flashed up the slide that will kind of shape out our cyber strategic outlook. That really is that blueprint that is driving activities day to day for me and my forces, because it mimics what our nation needs from us. And it's everything from, truly contributing under the Tri-Service Maritime Strategy, leveraging those alliances and partnerships, to protecting our vital lifeblood, within the maritime transportation sector. And none more prominent than today when we think about that Russia-Ukraine conflict and the potential bleed over into our homeland security spectrum and what retaliatory strikes might look like across our 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So, this is a great job for me to be sitting in. You've got a lot of trusted professionals within our team. I look forward to talking to you some more about how we're getting after our business. But thanks, Josh.
Charles?
I think I have a bit of a different perspective. Of course, I'm deeply concerned about all of the armed services in the country that I reside, but additionally, I have clients that are concerned that they will be caught in the digital crossfire of events worldwide. And to a degree, they already have been. You think about all the ransomware, all the criminal enterprises. I think that many of the organizations with which we work have been preparing for this eventuality of escalation of digital avenues for nation states for quite some time, but no one was really sure what it would look like. And I think that we will look back on the age of today, of 2022, as a tipping point for information security and the way we work with each other. Private sector, public sector, they're really, all of these silos that we build up are meaningless for attackers, because if you look at it through the eyes of an attacker, they really don't care how you align yourself. They don't care who your boss is. They don't care who signs your paycheck. They care about their goals, not yours. And all too often in information security, whether it's public sector, private sector, or somewhere in between, we tend to think about our own goals and not the goals of the attacker. And I think if we're going to be successful, we need to turn that on its head and start looking at everything through the eyes of an attacker. Instead of focusing on use cases, we need to start focusing on abuse cases. And realistically, I think that we need to change the way we operate. And we need to do it quickly, because the attackers aren't going to call timeout and wait for us.
That couldn't have been a better setup. We need to change the way we operate at speed. Hey, Josh, I appreciate you coming out. I want to echo General Glavy's comments to the Navy League and for Julia for pulling this together, because I think what I looked at across the 3 days, this is probably one of the most imperative conversations that we can have with industry, with our partner nations, and across the tri-service, our naval services. As Josh said, right now I'm the Director of Information Warfare Integration at the Pentagon, but I want to take this in a different direction. I want to talk about the last 4 years, because when we're talking about cybersecurity, it really is about warfare and warfighting. And I want to give you the operational commander's perspective, because cybersecurity is commander's business. It is imperative that we get cybersecurity right up front if we're going to be a lethal, agile, and ready force. And I don't care if you're operating a hospital with cybersecurity of PII for health records, if you're a DDG CO, if you're a net-enabled tank driver, or you're running the Naval or National Ice Center. Cybersecurity is just like physical security was back in 1991 when I joined the Navy. We're worried about cat cards and gate guards and people coming through the fence. Well, right now, everything on our network is a hole in the fence if we don't patch it at speed. Everyone that puts their fingers on a keyboard has a role and a responsibility and accountability for cybersecurity. It's not something that we're given. And in the past, I would tell you, as growing up in the Navy, cybersecurity is something that was delivered to you. Right now, cybersecurity is something that we're generating and must generate, and it's taking a lot of our commanders' bandwidth to make sure that we don't have a hole in the fence that we don't know about. Cybersecurity is every bit of warfighting as every other aspect that you want to talk about, and it's on every kill chain. Weak cybersecurity, weak kill chain. So what do we do to address it? I think we talked about it. We have to shift the culture from compliance, once every 3 years being inspected, to expect what you inspect. That's walking the deck plates every day, looking at your network every day, making sure the speed from a patch or a vulnerability that's identified to a patch is not weeks, but minutes or seconds. It needs to be part of our DNA. We need to shift the culture across, and I'll just speak for the Navy. We need to shift it from compliance to readiness, and we need to drive the ownership to everybody who serves in the Department of the Navy in or out of uniform. We also need to look at cybersecurity from the front end. Largely, we look at cybersecurity as something that we bolt on. This needs to be bolted in and part of the DNA up front, from the foundry to the chip, all the way to the end user and the rack on board a ship. We needed to use AI and ML to speed that time from vulnerability to patch, again, from weeks to minutes or potentially even seconds. The other thing we need to really focus on, in my opinion, is we need to look at cybersecurity standards across the force. And when I say the force, I'm talking industry, academia, across our naval services, and with our partner nations. Just like an anchor chain, cybersecurity, you have one weak link, that cybersecurity is broken. So we need to start talking about cybersecurity across our force and what is the real readiness in cybersecurity that we're delivering to the integrated all-domain naval power. And that really does call for all of us to collaborate and coordinate on those standards, and not only set high standards, but then execute those.
Thank you for the opening, panelists. And now we'll get into the questions. General Glavy, again, our joint doctrine states that cyber operations are most effective when integrated with other fires. What are the challenges to integrating with traditional maritime operations, and how is the Marine Corps integrating cyber capabilities with other non-kinetic effects?
So the Marine Corps is a combined arms force, and I think it's important from a culture standpoint to kind of lay that out. From the time you're a second lieutenant at the basic school or a young Marine at Paris Island or San Diego, it's this idea of combined arms. And what exactly, that word's used a lot, what exactly does that mean? But it's really about the full integration of fires where the effect of one and the counter by the adversary creates the opportunity of the other. So it's truly an asymmetric advantage of, when you look at, the classic example of direct fire weapons forces an adversary to be stationary, and of course indirect fires prefers a stationary target. So those together form a combined arms. Very true, both from a kinetic and non-kinetic standpoint, how we do that. And again, we're seeing that played out, and people were worried that there'd be a classification problem in some of these discussions. There is so much alive and in front of us on how this is playing out from an information environment, and whether it's cyberspace or the ability to use the information environment to gain an advantage, it is there. YouTube videos of the Mi-28 strike, if you haven't seen that, eye-opening, right? As a helicopter pilot, certainly that causes incredible alarm but it's not so much that a surface-to-air missile strikes a state-of-the-art Russian helicopter, but the fact that it all is played out in your living room or wherever that video is displayed. But the idea of integrating fires to gain an advantage is true, and we're seeing it time and time again. And so as we look at the ability to maneuver in domains like cyber or space to set you up for placement and access to deliver 10-digit quality information operations like effects, you see where all these things combine on top of each other to create an asymmetric advantage. So I think it's true from a culture standpoint that as we create, we've created the MAGTF Combined Arms Center out of 29 Palms, California. Every Marine for the last century or so has been out and about out there training to this high combined arms standard. But the non-kinetic world fits perfectly into it. I will tell you, so far as we look at gray zone operations, the competition rivalry phase, we find ourselves that these type of fires and effects certainly take on a more pertinent role, certainly for our MEF commanders. I mentioned our MIGs, our MEF information groups, but a lot of our fire and effects cells are ending up there, or ending up in the MEF information group, because that's where a lot of the fires and outcomes and effects can be generated, especially in this gray zone competition rivalry phase that we find ourselves in campaigning. So it's critical that they are integrated. Authorities are always hard. Authorities and approvals, for that matter, they're out there. We've seen them done the right way. They take energy and effort. You got to have your processes down very succinctly in order to execute. But it is indeed possible. But back to the initial point, the combined arms nature of kinetic and non-kinetic fit perfectly with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Ryan, the Cyber Strategic Outlook lists operating in and through cyberspace as a key line of effort for the Coast Guard. How do cyber operations help the Coast Guard accomplish its many traditional missions?
Thanks, Josh. And when I sat here at this forum back in August, the Coast Guard announced the release of our Cyber Strategic Outlook, and it has truly governed all of our activities since that point. 3 lines of effort. Protecting our own backyard, to Admiral Octen's point. You've got to have a good defensive perimeter that in terrain that you can defend to ensure that your capabilities are available where and when you need them. So, that's job 1 for us. I've got people dedicated around the clock that are really driving on that line of effort focused on protecting our own infrastructure. And then as I think about the Department of Homeland Security's focus in protecting the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, the maritime transportation environment, the lifeblood of this maritime nation, needs an organization like the Coast Guard to be on point to help to galvanize those efforts, both in a prevention paradigm and into the response arena where and when needed. And so, we're following the lead of U.S. Cyber Command, generating forces that allow us to provide that entire spectrum of capabilities. And so I can deploy into the homeland. I can protect our $5.4 trillion of economic activity arriving on our shores through maritime conveyance, day in and day out. And then, Josh, I think to your broader point, how do we bring cyberspace into reality for the Coast Guard? We already ply the waters across the global maritime commons, but we're doing it in some cases with decades-old type approaches. Our commandant is bringing to bear a brand new shipbuilding environment that's, upgrading all of our national capital assets. But we can amplify the functionality and the return on investment by interspersing and interlacing cyberspace operational capabilities. That's the mentality shift that I think, we're hearing from the tri-service leadership. How do you get this notion of integrated deterrence that Secretary of Defense is after? How do we protect the homeland like Secretary Mayorkas is committed to? But then how do we meet my commandant's mandate to be a global Coast Guard? We are helping our field commanders to understand where cyberspace is complementary to the way that they're doing business and have been throughout their careers. But we also have the enthusiasm of the up-and-coming generation to be able to envision a different future, to combat those adversaries that Charles has been talking about. They're not going to wait for us. They're not going to give us the latitude to be able to pigeonhole everything into our old paradigms. We've got to continue to evolve. And so whether it's trying to weave cyberspace functionality into how do you combat illegal fishing across the global seas, how do we integrate cyberspace techniques into preserving the maritime safety and security of the international mariners? You know, how do we protect against threats arriving on our shore through nefarious adversaries that may not be arriving physically, but are coming in through cyberspace? We've got to condition our forces. We're all about that today, whether it's in our cyber protection team generation or broaching into the world of cyber mission teams that General Glavy helped to carve the path for. So we're getting into it.
All right. Mr. Henderson, IBM recently published the X-Force Threat Intelligence Index for 2022. Could you share with us some of the major findings in the report and any relevant data points specific to the maritime services or industry partners in the maritime sector?
Sure. You know, forever we've been talking about cybersecurity, and there's been a perception within the world that cybersecurity was a financial services problem. Your credit card, your bank, your financial assets. For the first time in almost a decade, we did not see financial services as the #1 targeted industry in the world. And I think that marks a change in behavior of the attacker. And in fact, they're going after manufacturing. And they're going after manufacturing, they're going after assembly lines, they're going after OT environments, they're going after not data, not financial accounts. They're going after targets that have real world impact. We used to use the term virtual compromise or virtual data and things like that. This wasn't virtual. When somebody shuts down your assembly line and your meat packing plant can't process meat, that's not a virtual impact. You can actually go out and look at it. That's a huge change in the way attacks are operating. And that should be a wake-up call to everyone in this room, because what you're seeing is a paradigm shift from the attacks of ones and zeros to the attack against people, the attack against infrastructure. And lest you think that those attacks don't impact military service, I would tell you that there is no military supply chain. There is no private sector supply chain. There is a global supply chain now, and there is a very vulnerable global supply chain. In fact, you know, and I said in the pre-meetings that we had, you know, no one thought of toilet paper as critical infrastructure until the pandemic came along. The pandemic exposed just how vulnerable our supply chain is. And unfortunately, threat actors, whether they be nation state, criminal actors, what have you, took note of that, and they adopted attack techniques that were stolen from nature. And frankly, those are some very effective techniques. And it's all about leverage. And they've managed to show us that they have leverage over our supply chain. So it isn't enough for military service branch to say, we will secure ourselves. This is a united undertaking because we are all under the same digital microscope.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Admiral O'Con, you mentioned in your opening statement that cybersecurity is now commander's business along with everything else. In your view, what role does cybersecurity play during day-to-day competition, crisis, and conflict phases?
Yeah, it consumes every aspect from competition to crisis. And I think it's no more evident across the naval services, again, because depending on where we're at, you know, cybersecurity starts up front even before we get underway, whether or not your GPS or AIS, your HM&E, security systems control. But then once you get underway, we pose a different problem from competition to crisis in that we're not connected to a land. You know, we require the space layer to be as cybersecure, if not more, because that is our transport layer. That is how we communicate beyond line of sight. And so, to your point, it is not a just naval or DoD. It is a global. And so, our partners in industry, in the space layer, and in our weapon systems, and our partner nations, anyone who we wish to do business with, cybersecurity has got to be a front and center conversation for each one of us. And again, it needs to start there. If you want to start on the high ground, you have to start with strong, resilient cybersecurity. It can't be something we think about after we're halfway through a conversation.
All right, thank you. General Glavy, back to you, sir. In October 2021, the Secretary of the Navy put out strategic guidance emphasizing close coordination between the Navy and the Marine Corps. How did the Navy and the Marine Corps, in your view, coordinate their activities in cyberspace? And if you have any examples of successes and lessons learned for the audience, that would be great.
Thank you. So I could start right where Admiral Ryan works up at U.S. Cyber Command, Mark 4 Cyber, U.S. Marine Corps Forces Cyberspace Command, and Fleet Cyber, 10th Fleet are obviously locked at the hip up there, working for General Nakasone with other great teammates across the cyber mission forces. Significant relationship, very interactive, very proactive, best practices, to the point that a combat mission team from the United States Marine Corps actually works for Admiral Myers and the Joint Force headquarters there. So there's a lot of certainly interaction there. Being co-located at Fort Meade, also very, very helpful. I'll tell you, just at the Department of the Navy level, a significant amount of interaction. Susan, Admiral Joyner, is sitting here in the audience, and she certainly sees a lot of us as we interact together and making sure from a policy design architecture standpoint that we try to overlap as much as possible. I will tell you the magic happens, and it usually does, back to the deck plate level, but out, for us out on those amazing amphibious ships where Marines and sailors interact in ways that after 8 Marine Expeditionary Unit deployments that just still amaze me to this day. How they work together to include now with all the networks aboard those ships, those amazing ships that give placement and access for the nation, give maneuver for the nation. But to see them working day in the life. As an aviator, I spent a lot of time on the flight deck, but now in this role, watching them more and more, what they do from a network standpoint, to include all the defensive cyberspace operations, to the point that we have a team that fully interacts with the communications department on that ship to make sure that those networks are hardened and resilient and ready to fight on a good day and a bad day. So there's a lot there. More to go, a lot more as we determine how the hybrid cloud environment's going to happen. There'll be absolutely incredible amount of interaction, interoperability, things like Project Overmatch. The whole joint all-domain command and control construct affords more and more overlapping opportunities that we're going to get after. There are nuances. Certainly that ship goes haze gray and underway, and the only way it's connected to the world is through the space layer. So that means that there's certain challenges with that, and ones we gotta really be insightful of and making sure from a warfighting standpoint that the bandwidth is there to do what we need to do. And then Marines fall into an expeditionary role as well, where that space layer is also critical, and other aspects as well on how we execute a transport layer. So I think more and more, a lot of it happens. I think in the Pentagon, we want to force it more. I think in the fleet level, looking at what 6th Fleet is doing with 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, what 7th Fleet does with 3MEF, and of course, what 3rd Fleet and 5th Fleet do with their corresponding Marine Expeditionary Force, significant. That makes this all come to fruition. So I think there's a lot out there, and a lot of integration, and certainly more to go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Ryan, as the Senior Cyber Coast Guard Officer, what advice would you have for the maritime transportation sector as far as the greatest risks that they face and where they should concentrate their defenses?
Pay attention to what's happening in the open source, because that is reality for all of us. Those threats and attacks that you hear on your daily media coverage, that is today's reality. Those are the things we're trying to guard and protect against. But it is a relentless battle, and we need to be as persistent as our adversaries. And so, when we think about, how do we galvanize the nation, you're seeing that play out today, and if you think about the run up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what was the conversation in the international space talking about? It was talking about cyber attacks. It was talking about how they could condition the battlefield, how they could disrupt those key capabilities in Ukraine. And then they were talking about the potential for retaliatory strikes here within the United States and with other allied and partner nations. And so, that's the notion of, how is warfare being fought today? And so, whether it's nation state potential adversary activity, malicious cyber actors, whether it's the hacktivist, all of those things are today's realities. We've got to continue to drive up the fabric of safety and security across our nation. You're seeing that within the DHS umbrella really emerging from a relatively new agency, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They are trying to really propagate across those 16 critical infrastructure sectors this national dialogue, reinforcing with the business leaders, with the government stakeholders, we all have a part and a responsibility. We can no longer think that it's somebody else's job to protect us. We've got to make it a collective partnership that exists within government, it exists within industry. Fortunately, we're seeing things like Director Easterly's Shields Up campaign take hold. It is reshaping some of the conversation. It is galvanizing commitment to make sure that as much as we can, we're making the right investments, we're creating the right posture, and ultimately we're doing what we can to protect those things that are vital to us and our citizens. That is a nonstop battle rhythm. We've got to take those lessons from the DoD environment, harness the great ideas coming out of industry, integrate it, under some good both regulatory along with partnering capabilities, and make us domestically as strong as we can, and then make sure that we're seeing that same commitment across the globe. So the Coast Guard's in that sweet spot. We're going to continue championing those activities, but fortunately, we are not a voice of one. Cyber, as General Nakasone says, is definitely a team sport. For those of you in the audience that are bringing capability to bear or helping to shape the landscape, keep at it, because we need the collective team to be on point. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Henderson, the report we were talking about just a few minutes ago found that ransomware was the top cyber attack vector in 2021, and that there's a trend towards exploiting vulnerabilities in operational technology, more engineering-based stuff, rather than traditional IT. So what advice do you have for both our industry partners and your service leads around you in terms of protecting their OT infrastructure and defending against that ransomware?
I think we can really take a page from CISA here, and you start looking at this shift to OT and ransomware. And by the way, if you start thinking about the wiper malware that everyone's talking about out in Ukraine right now, if that sounds a lot like ransomware, that rather than encrypting your files, it just deletes your files, it should. The attack vector is very similar. It's because the attackers are taking things that work, trying to gain as much leverage as possible, and executing on them. And I think CISA has done a really good job of bringing industry and a lot of people together, because we're facing a common adversary, and we need to form a common defense. If you talk to an enterprise class company, you say, take a poll of them, and how many vulnerabilities, unpatched vulnerabilities do you have at any given time? The number is about 1.7 million. That's a huge number. And if you think you're going to dig this problem away, dig out of the hole by patching vulnerabilities, you're not going to. It becomes a multifaceted approach: detect, respond quickly, stymie attack. It's not a defensible perimeter. And if we accept that reality, we realize that we can't do it alone. And if we work together jointly, if we share the attack intelligence, if we work on defense techniques, if we start creating a common defense, we can do it. So I think we need to look at ways that we can proactively work together. And it's great to stand in a room and say, we're going to partner now, and this is really going to work. But at the end of the day, what really needs to happen is we need to learn from each other, because very often today I see folks try to reinvent the wheel on defense against cyber attacks, and frankly, it's not working. And going back to the way we begun this, if you're comparing ransomware and wiper, you should have a common defense technique against both cases of malware that should work. But instead, we're treating it like a whole new phenomenon. And I think that's setting ourselves up for failure.
Thank you for the insight. Admiral Ocon, one of the things that the services and the industry have in common is the critical need for talented cyber and cybersecurity workers. The Navy requires tens of thousands of cybersecurity workforce people to do business. If you could speak to what the Navy's doing to improve its recruiting and retention efforts for those professionals.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Retaining our talented cybersecurity workforce is front and center. And I know Susan Breyer-Joyner is working it every day. Because we are in competition, it is a global sport. And cybersecurity, the folks that we have, we've got to keep them focused focused on the readiness aspect. I go back to the commander's business. And too often right now, they're focused on compliance, right? They're really not out there looking at the networks. They're more focused on patching and scanning, the things that can be done a lot faster. So we think we need to evolve our cybersecurity workforce to get them in a more ready stance and a less compliant stance. The other thing is we need to start investing in them. I know we've done a couple of cybersecurity workforce studies, both on the civilian and the military, and really taking the best industry practices of advancing their education and their applicability and their employment and bringing those into the department.
Thank you. And with that, those are our moderated questions. We can open it up to the audience if anyone wants to step up to the microphone or shout out.
Hi, Karen Van Hoon with the cybersecurity company Proofpoint. There's a recent study that was put out, I believe it was Verizon, that says 97% of breaches happen through people. That includes ransomware. So I'd like to understand what the government's doing to focus on the problem, which is protecting the people.
Is your question addressed in any particular member or?
To the government, please.
I'm happy to step in from the operational commander standpoint. Testing, practicing, and then scheduling, measuring performance on our people. You know, our people are great Americans. We aspire to the great American theory. They're trying to do the best. But I think there are things out there that they don't know about that are going on. And this is where I think we can get industry that is able to come in and test them in a controlled environment and then give feedback on their performance. I don't think anybody willingly opens up malware and says, hey, I want to be a 2 cybersecurity performer today. I think everybody tries to do the very best. So having those conversations with our industry partners, those things that are out there, and I'll be honest, I don't know if the Department of Defense has a higher percentage or a lower percentage on standard across cyber performers, both in industry and out. But I'll just tell you, our folks, both the cybersecurity workforce and our general sailors and civilians, take it very seriously and are trying to do the very best.
I'm not government, but I'd like to add something there. I think a lot of this goes down to the fact that we train our people to behave badly. I mean, we tell people not to click on links in email, but we send them email with links in them. Mm-hmm. If we're going to expect people to be lower profile and less likely to be victimized, it starts at home. It actually starts at industry. I think we as industry need to start training people better, because no matter what your job function is, you're trained by industry. You're trained by the way that your cloud provider behaves. You're trained by the way your news outlet behaves. And the more that you are trained to do badly at home, the more you will do badly at work. And I think we need to make the U.S. population more resilient, more defendable to attack. And I think that starts with private industry stepping up and coming up with common standards for the way we are going to interact with our users.
The only thing I could add, if I could, is that when the whole current events was being initiated, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the very first thing she put out is for everybody to go back and make sure we're prepared from a cybersecurity standpoint, not only from a Department of Defense infrastructure standpoint, but from their personal family lives to make sure they're ready for what possibly could happen. So I think from a people standpoint, I think there is a lot of focus. It certainly can be better, without a doubt. But I think time and time again, we do end up with this knee in the curve where we make it easy. You know, we leave the keys in the car, the windows down, and the door's unlocked, and maybe the keys are in the ignition. I mean, we sometimes make this too easy. Not to say that there's a better way to do cybersecurity writ large, but we always perhaps don't put enough responsibility on the individual how we're supposed to do this and do it in a resilient manner. So, thank you.
Thank you.
There's actually a second part to that question, if you don't mind. So in that same study, it talks about how the government is spending 85% of their budget on legacy systems, which the secretary was talking today about getting rid of legacy, and only 15% focusing on the problem, which is the people. So how are you going to shift your culture where the government starts to spend on more futuristic type of tools moving forward?
I would just say from the Coast Guard perspective, legacy, means capability that we need today. And there has to be a measured recapitalization plan. We see that in some of our hard assets. We're embarked on the biggest shipbuilding recapitalization since World War II, but we're also reconditioning our workforce. We're trying to bring them into, modern era skills and capabilities as well. And I don't think it's any different within, pick your industrial segment. That is a perpetual evolution. You're never going to get out of, that risk posture. If you look at, casualties or mishaps, what's the number one causal factor? It's typically human error or some human in the error chain. And so not surprising, in the cybersecurity arena, we face those same challenges and issues. What I would say, during the SecNav lunch, you heard all those people being recognized for their commitment to safety and the programs that help to drive change. I think it's going to take that concerted effort to make sure that we're all managing our own house. But that's got to be a total equation in government, in industry, in our personal lives as well. So it's just persistence again.
Thank you.
Major Eric Peterson from the Airland Sea Application Center. Do you believe that now is the right time to establish a separate service for cyber to help with standardizing our efforts across the DoD and industry to better deal with China and other near-peer threats? I know we have Cybercom in each of the service provided forces, but we still organize, train, and equip differently across each services.
So for the sake of argument, I think an argument could be made, right? Just like Space Forces today now, based on a domain, the significant impact it provides and capability it provides to the nations, we now have a Space Forces. Parochially, personally as a Marine, watching our Marines interact in cyberspace, defense, offense, full spectrum, pretty amazing to watch. So parochially, the Marines tend to do well. They perform to a high standard. And I think part of the cyberspace aspect, it's like a core capability. You got to have it. You got to do it in some way, shape, or form. It's, in the 21st century, you got to have game, and you got to have a core capability with expertise, tradecraft to go along with it for all the warfighting functions that you have to execute. So I'm not helpful. I think there is an argument. I think that argument's been made a few times. There's certain actions taking place to empower Cyber Command more and more. But at the end of the day, there's something to be said about bringing a service, the best of the services, even in the competitive environment that we reside in to even make the cyber domain better and our ability to execute within it.
So I'll say if you're looking at creating a new service, what you're looking at is taking people out of the existing services and moving them into a new one, which makes this fundamentally, if counterintuitively, a people problem, right? You're moving people more than assets, you're moving talent. And to sort of foot stomp what General Glavy alluded to, you cannot take the defensive, the cybersecurity that we're here to discuss out of the individual services, or you will leave them vulnerable. It is no more realistic to expect Cybercom to unilaterally protect every asset, especially when you listen to Admiral Ocon. A ship at sea is disconnected from the network. The cybersecurity for that ship has to reside on that ship. Those people have to be within those units to be able to protect things that are forward deployed. So if you look at the human resources side of cyber, which breaks into 5 silos: cybersecurity, cyber IT, cyber effects, intel support to cyber, and the enablers, you cannot take that cyber IT and that cybersecurity, which is like 3/4 of the pie, away from the services and expect the services to still be able to function. Could you create a cyber force entirely focused on that effects mission, on that intel mission? I believe you have that in Cybercom already. So, but the case could still be made.
I really like the question because it makes us think. And it makes us think about how we evolve this domain. I don't have an answer one way or the other, but I do know that these conflictual conversations we have are very good for our services to make sure we're aligned and one of us doesn't go out on our own, or when we do talk about our equities at sea, if there was going to be another service formed, that we are aligned in what that service, that new service would provide us. So I really appreciate that conversation. I've never really thought about it until now.
Hey, I would just echo, I talked about, the Coast Guard looking across multiple landscapes. So what I see when I look out is I see a really progressive functional combatant command that's bringing the power of the joint force to bear to our nation's military defense issues. But then conversely, I see organizations that our Congress and administration has said, hey, we want a similar coordinating group within the federal cyber executive branch and into industry with a group like CISA, that isn't going to solve all of our problems, but it's supposed to be a coordinating body. And we're seeing the power of those partnerships and relationships emerge on a daily basis in the cyber arena. Look how many Tri-SEAL advisories or products have been released: FBI, NSA, US Cyber Command, CISA. You're seeing them bring their collective equities to bear, trying to help rebalance this domain. And so I don't know that we need to throw all of that away. We've got some great strategic visionaries in the right chairs right now, across multiple segments of our administration, and I think out into industry, that are allowing that to rebalance. We're seeing functions like the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative that is bringing key industry stakeholders into the conversation, sharing the right intelligence and information, and a corollary within the National Security Agency with their Cyber Collaborative Center. So we're seeing those things emerge. They are, I think, reshaping the landscape. At some point in the future, we may have to have something more drastic, but from my chair today, we've got a lot of exciting things going on.
I think the importance of JCDC specifically, I think we're going to look back on this 5 years from now and realize what a shift it was, from talking about how we were going to theoretically work together to actually just working together. Sometimes you got to stop talking about it, you got to do it, and they've done a very good job at execution.
Okay, I think we have time for one more quick question, sir.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. John Doyle with Sea Power Magazine. Gentlemen, the role that cyber has played in the David and Goliath struggle we've seen in Ukraine being played out is talked about everywhere. And I believe it was the Admiral who said earlier that there was the widespread concern about cyber attacks leading up to the shooting war. And that all seems to hark back to after 9/11, the concerns about attacks from non-state actors. And I'm just wondering now, with the focus that we've had on a great power competition, but what we've seen go on in Ukraine, whether this raises again a risk of cyber attack from various entities, whether it's criminals or terrorists. And maybe more broadly, the question should be, who do you see as the enemy going forward?
Okay, I'll take first shot.
Charles,
This
I was
is
gonna
all
say
I will,
yours.
Ah,
I will piggyback on
the enemy is anyone who would do us harm. Look, it's really easy to focus on one adversary and say, you know, it is this criminal group or that criminal group that we need to be worried about. You know what? The truth of the matter is that the criminal groups last about 18 months. And then they bust up the criminal group. The same people that were in the first criminal group rebrand. If that sounds like a corporate exercise, it should, because they're structured very similarly to companies. They rebrand and they start a new criminal group. And that new criminal group has a head start because they're all familiar with each other and work together and have a previous working relationship, I guess is the way you describe it. And they're off to the races. And they want to get involved in nation state actions in the Ukraine. They pivot from ransomware to wiper malware. You know what? The attack vector is the exact same. You get in, you deploy malware, and you go out. This is a very well executed phenomenon, and the problem that we face is that I think many people within industry, within government, always assumed that this would eventually be defeated or go away. And that's not the case. This is an ongoing problem. This is the new normal. You know, we talk about the uptick in ransomware attacks. This isn't a peak. This is a slope. And if we're going to win against an attacker that has built-in scale, they're approaching the problem with software as a service. They're approaching the problem with basically division of labor. They're going after high leverage targets. They're playing the game smart, is what I'm saying. And if we're not playing our defense intelligently, we're going to keep losing. And I don't say we're going to lose. I'm going to say we're going to keep losing. Because if you talk to folks in industry, and you know, I run an incident response team that deals with a lot of people that have had really bad days, and there's no take back at that point. It's all, you know, get to recovery and do the best you can. And I guess what I'm saying is we're already losing, and we're losing because we're not approaching the problem correctly. We're not being proactive. We're not thinking outside the box. We're trying to patch our way out of a problem, and that's an insurmountable mountain.
So we're just about at time. I'd like to give the panel members some opportunity for closing comments. We'll start at the far end, Admiral Ocon.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. If you could take one thing away from the discussion, and I think across the four of us, this goes to that skipper, that Marine captain in command of a unit that's going to fight our next war, deter aggression. And to your point, my enemy is anyone who wishes to ends up the liberal world order and replace it with their own authoritarian one, and we will not let that happen. So when you think about cybersecurity, and wherever you're at on that chain, think about that end user CO that's got to actually deploy that cybersecurity to defend America, because that's what we're talking about. Cybersecurity is in their DNA, and they need every one of our help to bring the strongest, most defensive posture to them.
We used to say that cybersecurity was everyone's responsibility, and I think we were wrong. Cybersecurity is our responsibility to make a reflex action so that people can do their core job function. And when we make cybersecurity an obstacle to successfully completing someone's job, we set them up for failure. We need to work together to your point, build cybersecurity so directly into the DNA of everything that we do that it is automatic reflex action and not something that troops, industry, whomever thinks about. They just do it.
Hey, I would just say to our industry stakeholders and partners in the audience, if you have influence, ensure we are bringing cybersecurity into the engineering design protocols. We can no longer accept things that are deployed quickly or that are a little bit faster to market or done cheaply at the expense of really undercutting the fabric of our national security. And that is economic security as well. And so I'd call on all of us, whether you're a producer of goods or a consumer of goods, be more discerning. Set the expectations higher. Demand better of what our nation can provide. And that holds true whether you're a government procurer or in the cyberspace and cybersecurity arena, or whether you're the lay person and the citizens of our United States. We can reshape how we're doing business through our expectations and the demand signals we create.
Hey, Josh, great job. Want to thank Julie again for putting me on this great team, and I believe it's Liberty Call. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
So on behalf of the panel, I'd like to thank the Navy League and CrowdStrike, our sponsor, and yes, Julia for wrangling us all. We could have made it easier for her, but we didn't, and we owe her a debt of gratitude. Thank you all. Have a lovely evening.